Politico reveals a bombshell new report about the left's treatment of Antifa under President Obama. We will talk about that. We will also be getting to Donald Trump giving $1 million to Hurricane Harvey victims and why the left is now desperate for the Russia investigation to pan out, even more desperate than they were before. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Many a things to talk about today, plus we're going to get to the mailbag. But before we do any of that, first I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at MackWeldon.com. So, Mack Weldon is better than whatever you are wearing right now. They believe in smart design, premium fabrics, simple shopping. They make underwear, socks, shirts, undershirts, hoodies, sweatpants, more quality than you will ever wear. I wear Mack Weldon underwear, and they are just super comfortable. Not only are they super comfortable, they're really durable. You know, you go out and you buy some cheap underwear, and they fall apart in like 5 seconds. You have to throw them in the garbage. Mack Weldon underwear are super durable. I've been wearing them, not the same ones every day, guys, but I've been wearing Mack Weldon underwear for months now, and they feel the same as when they came out of the package. They are also naturally antimicrobial, which means that they eliminate odor. They want you to be comfortable. So if you don't like your first pair, then you can keep it, and they will still refund you, no questions asked. They perform well. They look good. You can wear it in. You can wear it out. When you go home, I don't dress like this when I go home. I actually get into comfortable clothes, and I always put on my Mack Weldon gear. That's the best gear you can have. MackWeldon.com. Get 20% off using promo code Shapiro. That's MackWeldon.com. Use promo code Shapiro, get 20% off. Again, it's spelled M-A-C-K, Weldon, W-E-L-D-O-N.com, MackWeldon.com. Use that promo code Shapiro, get 20% off, and let them know that we sent you as well. Okay, so President Trump, he made a statement yesterday that I was kind of surprised he hadn't done earlier, actually. He said that he was going to give a bunch of money to the Hurricane Harvey victims, which makes an awful lot of sense. The man's incredibly wealthy. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders made that announcement yesterday. And so here is what Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to say about it.
I had a chance to speak directly with the president earlier, and I'm happy to tell you that he is would like to join in the efforts that a lot of the people that we've seen across this country do. And he's pledging $1 million of personal money to the fund. And he's actually asked that I check with the folks in this room, since you are very good at research and have been doing a lot of reporting into the groups and organizations that are best and most effective in helping and providing aid, and he'd love some suggestions from the folks here, and I'd be happy to take those if any of you have them.
Okay,
but,
so
as
this
I said,
is all good
pledge.
stuff. Okay, and it's smart for President Trump to do this, obviously. It's good PR. It makes a lot of sense. Meanwhile, the Democrats are looking at this, and they're realizing that Trump's handling of Hurricane Harvey is actually pretty good. Most Americans are going to be pretty happy with how he has handled this natural disaster. It's better, frankly, than I thought he was going to handle a natural disaster. I thought his administration did a better job than I thought that they might do. So I really have no major complaints with President Trump here. I think that he's doing a pretty good job unifying the country around the Hurricane Harvey victims. Again, easy thing to unify around, but I think that he's done a good job with it. Democrats, however, are still focused on how do we stop Trump? How do we stop the Republicans? And so the way they're attempting to do this is by painting the Republicans as divisive. Bernie Sanders came out yesterday. He says that he hopes that President Trump stops dividing, and also he hopes that someone will at some point give him, finally, after long last, a pudding cup. Preferably tapioca, but if you do not have it, he will also take vanilla. He does not like chocolate. Go, Bernie Sanders.
That in Houston right now, people don't care whether you're black or you're white or you're Latino or you're gay or you're straight. People are helping each other, which is what this country is supposed to be about. People in Houston are coming together, and hope Trump stops dividing up the American people.
Okay, so let's point something out. It's not Trump at this point who's dividing the American people. Trump is responding the way he's supposed to be responding, and it's Sanders who's suggesting the divisions. And when it comes to the divisive rhetoric stuff, when it comes to the idea that Trump is the only one who's engaged in divisive rhetoric, this is not whataboutism, okay? I've been very, very critical of President Trump's rhetoric. I've criticized him for not disassociating himself from the alt-right. I think I've been pretty clear on this for the last 2 years at this point, that I think a lot of President Trump's rhetoric is designed to divide rather than to unite, and I don't like that part of his rhetoric that is designed to do that without actually naming an enemy. So I've been clear about that. That said, the idea that the left has proposed that Trump is the divider and they are the great uniters is absolute nonsense. This is a report from Politico, and it's an amazing report that's going to go unnoticed today, which is why we're going to bring attention to it on this, the most popular podcast on the right in America. So here's the story from Politico. They reported on Friday, the federal government has been worrying about the rise of Antifa. This is this leftist quasi-domestic terror group since early 2016. Not 2017. Like, most people became aware of Antifa in 2017 when Antifa burned a bunch of crap at a Yiannopoulos speech at Berkeley. But Antifa had been very active in 2016. They had engaged in violent riots in Sacramento. There was a riot in Sacramento. We talked to a member of one of the groups that was attending that rally. It was a white supremacist rally. There were a bunch of people who showed up to, quote-unquote, defend the rights of the white supremacists, and Antifa showed up ready to do violence. When this happened, it was not covered by the media, but that happened in the middle of 2016 in Sacramento at the state capitol. Apparently, the federal government has had reports on Antifa since early 2016, even labeled their activities domestic terrorist violence. Do you remember Obama saying anything about it in 2016? Anything? Did he say one word about Antifa or left-wing violence in 2016? No, I didn't think so. So we've gotten 2 years of President Trump must disassociate himself from the alt-right and white supremacist violence. Of course, I agree, everyone should have no problem doing that, right or left. But the left, including President Obama, hasn't had to do anything until now, right? Nancy Pelosi gave a statement this week talking about how Antifa was bad. Where were they last year? Why didn't they stop this thing when it was rising? According to Politico, quote, previously unreported documents disclosed that by April 2016, authorities believed that anarchist extremists were the primary instigators of violence at public rallies against a range of targets. Okay, again, that language, primary instigators. So the left has played this as though it's a cycle of violence. It's the white supremacists show up with a brick, and the Antifa people show up with a bat, and they go at each other. It is Antifa that has provoked these clashes, and then a lot of these white supremacist groups, a lot of these alt-right groups show up, and they look for violence as well. But the ones who are instigating this largely are Antifa. That's not according to me. That's according to the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. They were blamed by authorities for attacks on the police, government, and political institutions, along with symbols of the capitalist system, racism, social injustice, and fascism, according to a confidential 2016 joint intelligence assessment by the DHS and the FBI. The violence ratcheted up as President Trump's campaign swung into full gear. The FBI noted violence by Antifa in Texas, Oregon, California. Law enforcement put particular focus on a white supremacist rally in Sacramento. At the Sacramento rally, Antifa protesters came looking for violence and, quote, engaged in several activities indicating proficiency in pre-operational planning, to include organizing carpools to travel from different locations, raising bail money in preparation for arrests, counter-surveilling law enforcement using three-man scout teams, using handheld radios for communication, coordinating the event via social media, according to the DHS. That's planning. That's planning. This isn't just spontaneous violence. This is people on handheld radios warning each other when the cops are showing up. They've raised bail money in anticipation of arrests. They were organizing carpools to get to and from places. They were organizing how to get weapons. The FBI and DHS issued a report in April 2016 openly saying that Antifa was prepping for violence. New Jersey law enforcement reportedly stated that Antifa had cropped up in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Philly. Shockingly, some members of Antifa, quote, have gone overseas to train and fight with fellow anarchist organizations. Okay, sounds like a terror cell. Going overseas to train and fight with anarchist organizations. So, here is the question. This was happening in the middle of 2016. Where the hell was President Obama? Yeah, the violence in Charlottesville. President Trump was asked repeatedly, as well he should have been, denounce this violence. And he did repeatedly denounce the violence. And then he said there was violence on both sides, and the media went nuts over that particular statement. There's a lot more in the press conference that was bad, but that was correct. There was violence on both sides, and Antifa was causing a lot of it. Where was Obama for a year? Anytime there was a violent incident, Obama tended to downplay the violence and instead talk about the underlying root causes of the violence. And he got away with it. Remember, in April 2009, it's amazing the double standard that holds for the right and the left. Okay, so there's this report that comes out from the FBI and DHS, April 2016, talking about the violence of Antifa. Flash back before that 7 years, okay? It's now April 2009, shortly after Obama takes office. And the Department of Homeland Security, under the auspices of Janet Napolitano, who's now in charge of the University of California system, issued a report saying that right-wing extremism was on the rise, labeling anti-abortion, anti-immigration groups as suspect. The report specifically called out the prospect of lone wolf terrorism from those who agreed with quote-unquote right-wing viewpoints. The report was really vague, but the Obama administration stood by it. So, how about his apparently very specific report regarding Antifa from the year of the election? Not a word from the Obama administration. We're only finding out about it a year and a half after it happened. A year and a half. And let's contrast the language of that 2009 memo with the language of the Obama administration regarding political violence. The 2009 memo about right-wing violence, it says, quote, debates over appropriate immigration levels and enforcement policy generally fall within the realm of protected political speech under the First Amendment. But in some cases, anti-immigration or strident pro-enforcement fervor has been directed against specific groups and has the potential to turn violent. has the potential to turn violent. What does that even mean? Has the potential to turn violent. That's vague, but the Obama administration stood by it. But when left-wing rhetoric actually turned violent, what did Obama do? He said, oh, the violence is bad, but they do have some grievances, don't they? I'm speaking specifically about President Obama's speech in July 2016 after a black radical parroting Black Lives Matter talking points went out and murdered 5 police officers and wounded 7 others in Dallas. The officers were protecting a Black Lives Matter march at the time. Obama actually spent an inordinate amount of time echoing BLM's message at their funeral service. At their funeral service. Imagine if President Trump had actually gone out after Charlottesville and he had said, and he sort of did do this to a certain extent, the media went nuts. You remember that he went out and he said, listen, this violence is terrible, but Confederate statues, right? There's a legit argument to be had over Confederate statues. The media went completely nuts. Here's what Obama said at the funeral for people who were murdered by a Black Lives Matter supporter, a black radical who was echoing the talking points of Black Lives Matter. Here's what he said, quote, we know that bias remains. We know it, whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American or of Middle Eastern descent. We've all seen this bigotry in our own lives at some point. We've heard it at times in our own homes. If we're honest, perhaps we've heard prejudice in our own heads and felt it in our own hearts. And then he talks about how the cops were a bunch of racists. Amazing, the treatment, okay? But not one peep about Antifa, not one peep about Antifa. I want to talk a little bit more about that and how the Democrats are really split now between their radicals and their moderates. And their only hope left is getting President Trump and how they hope to do that. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at the USCCA. So many of you understand that in the end, protecting yourself and your family is your responsibility. If you're ever forced to defend yourself, your wife, your kid, it's a decision you make on the spot. You know, there's an instant when you know that you're going to have to pull the trigger. And many of us know we would act, but we wouldn't really have thought about what comes after because the cops show up, they may arrest you, you may end up having to fight it out with the authorities. You need protection from the law. And that's why you need to get self-defense insurance from the USCCA. They'll support you with 100% upfront coverage for criminal defense, civil suits, and bail funding. They have a 24/7 critical response team, local attorney coordination, and more. For all of that, go to defendmyfamilynow.com. That's defendmyfamilynow.com for coverage starting at only $13 per month. We know that we will defend our loved ones, but we should also defend our loved ones against the problems that come after having to defend them. Activate your membership today at defendmyfamilynow.com. Again, it's defendmyfamilynow.com. You get a limited edition range bag completely free, which is pretty cool. Defendmyfamilynow.com. Go over there, register, and again, you get that range bag completely free, the limited edition range bag. So that's pretty awesome. Plus, you get the insurance coverage, which is something that everybody should have. Go out and check out our friends at the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, USCCA, defendmyfamilynow.com. Okay, so again, the left needs to be asked. Every Democrat needs to be asked about Antifa at this point. They should have been asked about it a year ago. They should have been grilled about it a year ago. They should have been grilled about it after what happened in Sacramento. But the media was too ensconced in its narrative of Antifa as Normandy fighters to actually go out and fight violence. That's despicable. That's truly despicable. And you can see the split that's happening now inside the Democratic Party between the so-called moderates and the radicals. The radicals are still saying, well, Antifa has a point. They're not so bad. And the moderates, who are now being led by Nancy Pelosi of all people, they're saying Antifa's really bad. If the Democrats don't come together around this, I think it's indicative of a broader split inside the Democratic Party. The far left of the Democratic Party is even further left than Bernie Sanders. They're moving left at an increasingly rapid pace. The Democratic Party has split, and the old school Hillary Clinton, quote-unquote, moderate Democratic Party, which was never moderate, they're being left in the wake. Even Bernie Sanders is now being seen increasingly as a guy who's not radical enough. I've never seen a party move this far to one extreme this fast, and you can see it happening in real time. Antifa's accelerating that. Trump is certainly accelerating that. The left's hatred for Trump is driving them off the rails. Every Democrat should now be asked, will you denounce Antifa? Will you denounce them? I think Mark Thiessen has a great piece at Washington Post, and it is interesting. It's fascinating how white supremacists who get violent, they are seen as the ultimate evil. Totally fair. They are an ultimate evil. Left-wing extremists who get violent, I'm talking about communists and anarchists, they're seen as somehow superior to Nazis, which is weird to me. I mean, the communists were responsible for a couple 100 million deaths over the course of the last century. As Mark Thiessen said, I'm not sure why it is that somebody who gets violent in American streets carrying the flag of Stalin is better than somebody who gets violent in American streets carrying the flag of Hitler. These both seem like terrible people. And there is a moral equivalence there. And I think that's right. Now, communism is an ideology that is just as evil as Nazism in its own way. It's not racist the way that Nazism was, but it is certainly classist. I mean, these are people who suggested that people who are bourgeois be murdered. Okay? That you could separate people based on class. It's funny how both of these groups seem to center when it comes down to it. They both come down on the same side when it comes to the Jewish question. Neither of them really like the Jews very much. Stalin wasn't really fond, and neither was Hitler. But it is amazing how we in the United States, we've taken this sort of sanguine view of communism in a way that we never have with Nazism, even though they were both at the time cheered by Democrats at the time. The Nazi movement was seen as sort of a proto-fascist or fascist proto-forerunner of a more sophisticated movement that eventually could be used for good by a lot of people, including some mainstays of the Democratic Party back in the day. So, again, the only point to be made here is that we ought to be looking at the violence on both sides and condemning it and condemning the ideology that underlies it. But instead what we're seeing is some people on the left condemning the violence, not all, and very few people on the left condemning the ideology at all. Whereas everybody on the right who has any brain at all is condemning white supremacists and the alt-right. Okay, so what does this mean? Democrats have to know this stuff doesn't make them popular. Okay, the Antifa stuff is not going to make them popular. It's not going to make them well-loved. It makes them seem extreme and crazy because they're being extreme and crazy. And so instead, what they are focusing in on is their final hope, the last hope, right? Their very last hope of all is, beyond Trump destroying himself, is Robert Mueller. So Robert Mueller is the special investigator, and now there's some new developments in Robert Mueller's case. Again, they need to shut down these leaks. These leaks are just ridiculous. So here is the report from Mediaite. This is from yesterday from Joseph Wolfson. The team of special counsel Robert Mueller is reportedly collaborating with New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman in its ongoing investigation. According to a new report from Politico, Mueller's team and Schneiderman's office have been in contact in recent weeks, exchanging information and evidence on former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort and his financial transactions. Anonymous sources familiar with the collaboration have said they're potentially building a criminal case, possibly for money laundering, but no decision has been made whether or not charges will be filed. Nothing is imminent, one source told Politico. As Politico reports, Schneiderman could potentially provide Mueller additional leverage to get Manafort to cooperate with his investigation, noting that President Trump does not have pardoning power over state crimes. So here is the difficulty here. So everybody has been talking about Trump can always just pardon anybody who is convicted or anybody who's indicted. Not true of state crimes. If you are condemned of murder in a state court, you cannot be pardoned by the president. You can only be pardoned by the governor. So what does that mean? What it looks like Robert Mueller is coordinating with Eric Schneiderman, the very political, very left Attorney General of the state of New York, to go after Paul Manafort, who, as I've said before, is pretty corrupt, and then use those state charges as a way to get Manafort to flip on Trump. That could be what's happening here, right? You have Schneiderman charge Manafort in state court and then say, we'll drop those charges if you testify against Trump, and Trump can't pardon Manafort and just get out of that conundrum. That'd be very clever by Mueller if that's what he intends on doing. But it's very dangerous for President Trump, obviously, because sitting around waiting to have your former campaign chair indicted at the state level and then see where that ends up is a very dangerous game. A lot of people are suggesting that based on this, Trump should fire Mueller. That would be the biggest disaster of all. Right now, there's a game of chicken going on. Mueller's going as far as he can, almost daring Trump to fire him. If Trump fires him, all hell will break loose. It's going to be very difficult for Republicans to stand up in the face of President Trump firing the special investigator who's looking into election corruption. That's not the only story involving Mueller today. According to Betsy Woodruff from the Daily Beast, special counsel Bob Mueller has teamed up with the IRS. According to sources familiar with his investigation into alleged Russian election interference, his probe has enlisted the help of agents from the IRS's Criminal Investigations Unit. This unit, known as CI, is one of the federal government's most tight-knit, specialized, secretive investigative entities. It has 2,500 agents focusing exclusively on financial crime, including tax evasion and money laundering. The IRS does have access to Trump's tax returns. Potential financial crimes are a central part of Mueller's probes. That is part of the thing. Trump has said in the past that that would be the red line for him, is if Mueller started looking into financial dealings of his family, and Mueller said, screw that, I'm looking wherever I please. And there's a problem, too, which is that Trump has not actually staffed up the IRS. Right? Trump has not actually staffed up the IRS. This is according to the Daily Beast. The team-up between the IRS and Mueller probe could come with political complications. Mueller has already taken some criticism for the number of Democratic donors on his team. Those critiques intensified yesterday after the announcement about Schneiderman. Also, it is pretty clear that Trump has not filled out a lot of the senior positions at these particular agencies. Right? Trump has not yet named his pick to run the tax division, which is a post that requires Senate confirmation, and also a post which could help out Mueller in his investigation. So right now, an Obama appointee is filling the slot that can work with Mueller to give him the information. So Mueller can get all the dirt that he wants right now. Trump has put himself in this situation because, remember, it was Trump's activity regarding James Comey. It was his dragging in of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein that led to the appointment of the special counsel in the first place. Now, if he fires the special counsel, it'll look like a cover-up. So it's a full-scale problem for President Trump at this point. A lot of people saying, well, he should just fire people and get it over with, and that way they can't have grounds to impeach him. Again, impeachment is a political grounds. I think his best move here is to wait it out. And I honestly think that he's actually innocent of the Russia collusion. I don't think that Trump himself was colluding with Russia. I think that there is a possibility that Manafort was working with the Russians because Manafort's always worked with the Russians. I think there's the possibility that Flynn was doing so. But the idea that Trump knew about it is a whole different thing. So you could easily see a scenario where Trump's underlings go down and it looks more like Iran-Contra than it looks like Watergate. It looks a lot more like somebody underneath Trump goes down than like the president himself goes down. That's why I'm saying that I don't think Trump should fire Mueller. But what Mueller is doing is obviously provocative. What Mueller is doing is obviously aggressive. And so he must think that he's got something. The Democrats obviously are just ecstatic about this. MSNBC's Mark Halperin, he says Mueller is a ruthless opponent and is not afraid of President Trump.
Mueller is a cyborg with a head, a heart, and a brain. I mean, this is an opponent unlike Donald Trump.
I'm sorry. Say that. Can you say that again? I like that.
Very good.
He's a cyborg who has a head, a heart, and a brain.
Okay.
He's a relentless opponent, and one of the underappreciated aspects of how he's building this operation, I think, is his ability, because of his vast experience, to coordinate. He's in sync with the congressional investigations, whose investigators and members are not issuing, immunity to people or bringing up witnesses who will interfere with the case. He's coordinating within the Justice Department and the FBI. You don't hear any unhappiness coming from there. And now he's coordinating with another guy with subpoena power, another guy who is fearless and not afraid of Donald Trump, and a guy who can bring charges that the president can't pardon for. None of this is an accident. We're seeing through a glass darkly what this Mueller operation's like. We see only a tiny bit of it, but it's clear from everything we see that there is a strategy here, there's a fearlessness, and there's a level of coordination that makes anyone trying to help the president on this be put in a very defensive position.
Okay, so you can see the excitement from the media and all this, and we'll talk a little bit more about the excitement from some fake news people, like actual fake news people, in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to the sponsors over at Tides of History. This is a brand new podcast. It is just fantastic. Google Tides of History for more information. Okay, so what is it? It's all about why we have states, countries, taxes, wars. All of these institutions go back hundreds and hundreds of years. When did globalization start? Why does practically every government on earth follow the same basic organization? Wondery has a new podcast from PhD historian Patrick Wyman. He also happens to be an MMA analyst, by the way. It's called Tides of History, and it answers these questions. He looks at the time periods covering the fall of Rome and the rise of the early modern empire, so about 1350 to 1650. He talks about the roots of the modern world, where all of these socio-cultural structures we interact with came from, why do we have states? All of these questions can be traced back to this particular period. It's really entertaining. He breaks down what could be dry history into really fascinating stuff. If you love learning, and I do, then you need to go check out Tides of History, Wondery's new podcast, Tides of History. Really fantastic. Go listen to the first episode on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, and Google Tides of History for more information. I do highly recommend the podcast. It really is quite good. I like listening to other people's podcasts. I recommended one yesterday. This is the one that I recommend today, Tides of History. I would recommend it, by the way, whether or not they were a sponsor, because it is that good. It's a very, very good podcast. Tides of History. Go check it out over at Wondery or any other place that you can get your podcast. Okay, so I want to talk some more about all of this, plus I want to get to the mailbag. But for all of that, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com right now and become a subscriber. For $9.99 a month, you can subscribe to Daily Wire. You can get the rest of this show live. You can get the rest of Andrew Klavan's show live. You can get the rest of Michael Knowles' show live. All three of those shows are huge and growing. You can also get the website ad-free. Later when we post those shows, all of the ads are taken out, so you can listen to the shows ad-free as well, which is pretty cool. Plus, if you go over and get an annual subscription right now for $99 a year, you get this, the finest of all tumblers, the Leftist Tears Hot or Cold Daily Wire mug. It is unsurpassed in its quality. Unsurpassed. Okay, nothing finer has ever been created on this earth. Okay, there are diamonds that could not cut this thing. It is just unbelievable. Leftist Tears Hot or Cold, the Daily Wire. By the way, if a diamond doesn't cut this, it's not a real diamond. In any case, Leftist Tears How to Call. Get that for $99 annual subscription. Go check it out. Or if you just want to listen later, go over to iTunes or SoundCloud. Make sure you subscribe. Leave us a review. Always helps us with the rankings on iTunes, and we always appreciate it. We are the largest conservative podcast in the nation.